please make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I'm not going to go on too much longer. Safe to say that we've had this event, the rise of the community independent politicians, requested for months and months and months. So there is clearly a lot of interest. The way that I describe it to people is Fremantle seems to be in a loveless marriage with Labour, or like a marriage without sex, if you want to put it that way. And the best thing for a marriage like that is fear of infidelity. And so that's what tonight is all about. I love this MC. This is a wonderful man. I met him this year at Carnivale. I was in a mask making a fool of myself, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want to be friends?" Yeah. And he contacted me on Facebook afterwards and basically said, "I want to be more involved in community, doing more events that bring people together." He is an English teacher, and he spent a lot of time helping youth to articulate themselves and feel courageous with their feelings. And in that spirit, he's recently started the Frio Write Night, which is beautiful. So a round of applause for Ryan, please.
So I'm very glad to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for that very beautiful introduction, very heartfelt. As Christian said, I am an English teacher, and actually there was a student who he did a slam poetry event on his own in Northbridge on Saturday night, and sent me an email at about 11 p.m. on Saturday night saying, "Sir, I came second place." You know, and then he came up to me, well, I saw him this morning at school, and I remember this kid in year 8 doing a little poem, just blew everyone away at a creative writing club we had after school. So to see him now, in year 12, taking the initiative, having found his voice, to go out to Northbridge on his own. His mates didn't even come along with me, he went solo, rocked up on stage, second place, and he felt so proud. And I just felt at that moment, for a young person to feel like they found their voice and they have the courage to share it with the world is such a powerful thing. And I guess we're here tonight because we feel like we want to be part of Frio, finding its voice or voices, and those voices being strong and heard everywhere. So it's a real privilege to be here tonight. I must confess that my interest in politics has been somewhat dormant of late, and by of late I mean for the last 8 years. I mean, yes, I watched The Wire and The West Wing, and I read Dreams from My Father, and of course I indulged in a few of the greatest hits of Paul Keating on YouTube, as I'm sure we all have. But I sort of lost interest in it, I'm not quite sure why. I felt disconnected from politics. And as Christian said, this last year or two I've really made a more concerted effort to connect with community in Fremantle, connect with the people, and I think it's that's got me more interested in politics again. It's things like rocking up to Clancy's for a folk music jam on a Thursday night, or being involved in Carnivale, or just having one of those beautiful Sundays in Frio where you're roaming around in the sun and seeing people you know, and then end in the afternoon with the best ice cream in Frio, which is obviously cool. Did everyone agree with that one? Oh, sure. Okay, I've alienated the crowd. But it does raise the question of who is this community not working for? Whose voices aren't being fully heard? Who has been marginalised, and how can we work together as a community to make sure that Frio is a place where everyone feels heard and where everyone is flourishing? So it's in that spirit that I hope we can dive into tonight. And first up, I want to introduce Tony Fairweather. Now, smooth, wasn't it? So, Tony Fairweather, he's here tonight to speak. Yeah, let's give him a big round of applause. So, he's here tonight to speak as someone who has successfully worked with others within the community to seek an alternative representative in a safe seat. Tony is a corporate lawyer who was going about his business until a fateful month of October 2021, where he found motivation as a political novice in what were the dying days of the Morrison government. Connecting with others, he started a ground-up search for a community independent candidate in the federal seat of Curtin. And Tony is here tonight to share the success story and the advice that saw Minister Chaney elected. Please make him very welcome.
thanks. I'm not sure she's a minister yet. She's working on it. So it's great that Voices of Fremantle are here. There's so much opportunity, and I'm sure Lily at the end will talk about it. We've got some royalty here, Dennis Ginnivan, who the Voices of Indi, who does great work around the community. He probably will hardly recognise the story I'm about to tell, because we had to do it on fast forward, and I spoke to Dennis early on. But there's three themes with my little story to hopefully come out and hopefully resonate. One is it's people powered and it's bottom up. The second thing is it can start small, and usually it does. And the third thing, I think there's a real opportunity. The greatest opportunity is if there's a mismatch between your MP and particularly their pay and the way they act and vote, not what they say, and your community values. So if there's that mismatch, then it's game on. So it was fast and furious. It was October 2021. Curtin had missed the boat, seemingly. I don't know what people were doing. I'm a political novice, never been involved. You know, I'm pretty moderate, progressive, woke, that sort of stuff. And my wife handed me something on holiday, October 21, from Climate 200. It seemed pretty crisp and clear, talking about, you know, there could be a balance of power in federal politics. You know, people have popped up. You know, who doesn't want to do something on climate, on, you know, integrity and gender equity? Sounds pretty good, right? And basically, I don't know, had an epiphany, couldn't sleep that night. Usually I sleep really well. And I thought I'd do something. Rang my sister, who's a wonderful person, and said, how about this? What's that sound like? She said, yeah, sounds good. So four of us got round a kitchen table in Mosman Park, all novices. Sarah Silbert, I owe so much to. Bumped into her in a cafe. She agreed to come to a kitchen table conversation. So there were four of us, so it was super small. But so much had been done for us over East by brother and sister electorates, where, you know, you had Indi originally, you had Zali Steggall, who knocked off Tony Abbott, you had Zali Steggall going again, Kylie Tink had popped up, Allegra Spender, you know, like these are brother and sister electorates of Curtin, like, and those values, you know, why couldn't it work in Curtin? And so that's what we're talking about in kitchen table conversations. So although we were small, each of us had good networks, particularly the other three. And so when we came back, it felt like there were 40 or 50 people around the kitchen table, because they were reporting back, yes, my friends think the same, yeah. Guess what? We don't like Scott Morrison, you know. We can treat refugees better. We could do something about climate. Maybe integrity and anti-corruption commission. So it all seemed to resonate. So even though it was small, we were reaching into our networks. So Dennis would be pleased about that. We weren't fibbing it. And then from there, there was a fair bit of good luck. We got into the North Sydney network, who'd found out Kylie Tink. And like everybody in this community independence network, everybody is so generous. Everybody is so easy to deal with. They really did supercharge us, you know, from, you know, the colours you pick, which are pretty obvious, to, you know, helping out with initial media, to giving us the confidence to get out there and buy an ad in the local Post newspaper, to grow the group, which we did. We had Zoom calls. It was getting bigger, and we found a spokesperson who was really important, Anthony Maslin, who'd lost his kids in MH17, and he since then had only focused on positive things in his life. And I just knew him through work. He agreed to come on board, which was amazing. So we were given the confidence by the Community Independent Network to actually go forward and put in the ad in the paper. So this was, I think, 11 December 21. So we were late, really super late, and we were hoping we saved up $2,000 because that was how much you had to pay to nominate a candidate. We thought we'd keep that in our back pocket. But what that did was it really got the message out there through our spokesperson, through the ad, through articles. There were conversations were supercharged in the community, and we got in there before Christmas. There was a lot of good luck involved, and you know, there are moments of doubt, lots of moments of doubt. You know, Sarah Silbert was incredible, and myself were sitting in a cafe with an org chart given to us from North Sydney, and they know what to do, and they had a great org chart of a fundraising committee over here and people there, media here, and overall committee, campaign team. There's about 20 jobs, and there were 2 of us in the coffee shop. And I think I said to Sarah, what the fuck are you going to do? Because like, we're struggling here, but things got better. So there are moments of doubt, but if you can push through, bring people on board, embrace it. So from 11 December, things were supercharged, and thankfully there was someone else dreaming of doing something in another part of the electorate. A few people led us to her, and we got real confidence from, I've been hassling lots of people a lot of time. One, Alan Carpenter, who's here tonight, stopped some big gas and stood up to big gas, which is nice. I was hassling him a little bit, he was good, and he said, do you have anyone? I said, yes, you've got to keep it quiet because it's 2 days to launch. He said, yeah, sure. I said, it's a Chaney. And he said, is it Kate? I thought, what's going on here? And he said 2 things, and he said, she's one of the best people I've ever met, and she's going to win. And he was right.
Thank you, Tony. So just to let you all know, the clapping thing is just a nice playful way to make sure that we're running on time. So I'll clap once when we get to 5 minutes, clap twice at 6, and at 7 minutes, we'll all start clapping together. So, of course, we're very, very fortunate to have the Honourable Kate Chaney here with us tonight, the Independent Federal Member for Curtin, Western Australia. As you know, Kate was elected in 2022 as a community independent on a platform of climate action, integrity, future-focused economic management, and connected and inclusive communities. And please make her feel very welcome.
Thank you very much. What an absolutely lovely room this is. This is the most incredible group of people, and what a start you've made. Thank you very much, Tony. You can feel the emotion. Tony's passion really drove us across the finishing line, and there were 20 jobs on that page. Tony did 10 of them, Sarah did the other 10, and we took it from there. It has been the most incredible journey, and I'd never been involved in politics before, and really thought it looked pretty revolting and couldn't imagine ever having a place in it, but felt a deep dissatisfaction with the way the country was developing, and thought that was shared with others, but you know, I'd never expressed a political opinion out loud. And then when I had that first conversation with Tony and with about 5 or 6 people who are part of that Curtin Independent group, I realised how much we have in common in terms of our frustrations. And I spent 2 weeks thinking about it, and I woke up every morning feeling like I needed to vomit, thinking, I can't believe I'm actually considering doing this. There are so many reasons not to do it, but the one reason to do it is that it actually really matters. So after 2 weeks, I thought, I'm going to regret not doing this more than I regret doing it, and said yes. And from that day, I've not had a moment's regret. And we had this incredible journey of building a community of 900 volunteers from scratch in a 4-month period, and winning a safe seat with a group of absolute amateurs. None of us had any idea what we were doing, and a lot of the time we sort of had advice from people who said, "Well, this is how you should do it," and we'd say, "Yeah, nah, we don't like that. That doesn't feel right for our community." And I was very conscious that I'd have to live with myself no matter what happened at the election, and I had to make decisions, and we all had to make decisions that we felt good about no matter what happened. So it was an amazing journey, and then once I won, then I joined this lovely group of women from across the country who had similar background or similarly diverse backgrounds to mine, and came in as outsiders into Parliament, and that's been amazing. They are my friends, and we're not a party. We have a lot of values alignment. We all want to be a constructive part of our democracy, and we work hard to do that. Together and separately. And having those people enter that journey at the same time as me means there's been someone to share the experience with, where you can look at each other and say, does that seem weird to you that this is how that thing's done? Let's see if we can change it. And once you've achieved something unlikely, it makes you look at all the other things that are unlikely to change and think, what else can we change? And believe that things are possible. So it's been amazing, and I've learned huge learning curve. We're still very much driven by volunteers. We did a Curtin Pathway to Net Zero project, which is what I'm most proud about, where we had 50 volunteers in 5 working groups looking at what does Curtin look like when it's decarbonised and what will it take to get there. And these are the sorts of grassroots driven projects that I think you can do when you are riding the wave of community sentiment. And there's a lovely Margaret Wheatley quote. She says, "There's no force for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." And I've really felt like I've been very lucky to be part of that. And I'm excited to see it in other parts of the country too. Democracy is slow and messy, and we have to accept that. It's better than the alternative, but it's slow and messy. And so driving change is a matter of nudging. And so we keep on nudging, and you never know if your nudge is the one that gets things across the line. But I feel like we're going back to the fundamental principles of representative democracy and say, we think the Parliament should be a group of representatives of their communities who come together and address the problems that we're facing by making good laws, and making those laws better by all bringing your different perspectives to the table and improving them. And that's not how our system works, when we swing from one party to the other and one party wins and does their things, and the other party sits back and chucks rocks for 3 years until it's their turn. And so having a constructive crossbench, I think it means we can put issues on the agenda, keep the focus on, give governments permission to be bold, and also put pressure on them to be accountable. And that, to me, seems like a really positive thing for our democracy, given the huge and complex issues that we're facing. Our democracy needs to continue to evolve, and there's something very stale about 2 institutions that are designed to win elections rather than thinking about what's in the long-term interests of the country. And I think coming with and trying to retain some naivety has been really important, to think, well, no, why does it have to be like that? Change is possible, and we can be optimistic and hopeful and brave about the way we make decisions in Australia. So that's been an amazing thing to be part of. It's very exciting. I've done a few of these events in different communities, and it's so exciting to be there at the beginning while a community is deciding what it cares about, how much it cares about that, because it's bloody hard work. You have to really be motivated and be willing to put in the yards to understand what the issues are that will drive that passion, and also find the right person. And if you're considering doing this, it's absolutely overwhelmingly busy and full on, but it really feels like it's worth doing. So I have absolutely no regrets and feel optimistic about the future of the country and the future of our democracy and our ability to reinvigorate our representative democracy. So good luck and well done being here. I think this is probably the biggest of these types of events I've been to. So looking forward to some questions and answers later.
Thank you, Kate. And now our third and final speaker for this evening, before we get into some questions later, is please make very welcome Lily Jovic from Voices for Fremantle. Now I'm going to say a few more words about Lily. Lily is one of many Voices for Freo volunteers. Voices for Freo is a non-partisan community of Freo residents who want to make politics better. Lily and her community want representatives to truly represent Fremantle, put the community first. So let's hear from her now.
That's so nice, thank you. I like it. Like you've got like a nice centre of gravity, that's good. Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to cry. I'd love to, but I can't. And I'm probably going to swear now that Tony made it okay. So thank you, Tony, for that. So appreciate it. I would really also like, if you don't mind, off record, giving us a bit of a glimpse into the group chat you've got with the other independents. I'd love to just see what happens in there and what you guys talk about. Hello, and thank you for having us. It's truly wonderful to be here. I'm a huge fan of this event and I feel so lucky to be here with you all tonight. I attended my first Politics in the Pub last month and it was a juicy one. Kate's speech blew me away, the other Kate, and really lit a fire in my belly. She was even kind enough actually to share her speaking notes with me so I wouldn't stuff this up tonight. And I've been reflecting on her closing statement since then, where she said, small, locally owned businesses and those people who contribute to culture deserve a protective and guiding hand from the local, state and federal government through good policy. Now, if you subbed out small, locally owned businesses and you put in the people of Fremantle, it nicely sums up why community independent groups like ours are popping up all over WA and have been taking the nation by storm. It all starts when a bunch of people realise they deserve better. Better from their local, state and federal members. Better representation, better decision making, better policies and a much higher standard of community engagement. I'm one of several volunteers, as Ryan mentioned, from our fledgling but fabulous group who came together really very recently around this same idea that things could actually be done a bit better in Fremantle, to say the least. And we probably have enough passion, enthusiasm and collective intelligence amongst us to put that into action. So here we are, we're showing up and we're inviting anyone who feels remotely the same way to participate in upgrading our democracy the Freo way. We've put some very basic foundations in place. There's a flyer floating around on tables with a bit about what we're setting out to do and how you can get involved. Hello. I'm getting a great call work out of it.
Slowly drooping his thought.
No, I like it. It's good. It's got a link to our website on there. Have a squiz and join us in shaping what comes next. It doesn't matter how you normally vote or whether you're satisfied with the way things are. We really just want to hear from people, as many people as possible, across the state and federal electorate. That's why our immediate focus is on diving into community listening, or our community listening process that we're calling good faith conversations, because kitchen tables are a bit not very Freo, you know? No disrespect, great idea, but we don't all have kitchen tables, do you know what I mean? It's a bloody cost of living crisis. Who wants to have people at their house as well? But if you do have that, please run them at your kitchen and call them that. But in the meantime, if you want to broaden your horizons, feel free to do so. That's why we've changed the name. What we want to understand from that process, we want to learn what people value about living here, what their concerns are, the solutions they believe aren't being considered, and all the other good stuff that you chat about with your next door neighbour. We've been really inspired by the effectiveness and the transformative power of the national community independent movement, But what really unites us locally is a deep respect and admiration for the people and places in our community, and a desire to see what we could achieve with our collective power once people truly felt seen and heard. I don't think we're alone in thinking that Fremantle deserves better. Currently, it feels like we're that kid that gets left at the shops because our parents forgot about us. That never happened to me, but I'm sure there's someone out there today. Sorry if I just relived the trauma for you. So on that note, we're building our community from the ground up. We're reaching out across our electorate. We want to understand local priorities, and we want to invite people to participate in their democracy. It's yours. We're going to get started with these community listening sessions, good faith conversations, and we're going to survey people. We're going to run fun and exciting and informative events. We're going to start there and build up from that. If you've got other ideas, please let us know. Your voice, your vote, and our community matter. We can and should demand higher standards of our representation. We deserve to be heard and not taken for granted, as I believe we have been. We welcome everyone who shares in these goals to get involved and help make politics better. Ooh.
And I'm going to hand over now to Christian to talk us through expectations and how we're going to go about making sure it's a really engaging, passionate and respectful second half of the night.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, I want everybody to just quickly engage your imagination and trying to imagine being me, navigating through this crowd, trying to find people with their hands up, wearing Doc Martens like this. It's an occupational health and safety hazard, okay? So if you have a question and you want to meet me halfway, I will love you. We can be friends. So please do, meet me halfway. I believe in you. The only other thing to keep in mind, in fact, I already see somebody with a hand up, fantastic. 2 things to keep in mind. First is, concision is key. If you take too long to ask a question or make a point, you're eating other people's pizza. You're the greedy person. So if you feel like somebody has been talking for too long, yeah, I invite you to look for an opportunity to give them a loud round of applause. Exactly. Finally, it's inevitable that some of you won't get to ask questions because there's so many people here. So if anybody wants to be particularly brave and put their hand up right away, you have preference. I see 1, 2, 3. Great start. And 4. Great start. All right. Well said, Ryan. Okay. Opinions are welcome. Okay? These aren't just experts, your community. So if you have a view, it doesn't have to have a question mark, it can have an exclamation mark or even an ellipsis. All welcome. So we have number 1 over there.
Do we have a microphone or not?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you very much. Fiona Stanley, I've really enjoyed
Fiona Stanley.
Thank you. I just love this idea tonight. I think it's fantastic. I have a comment and I have a question. And the comment is that I know the kitchen table conversations, you're going to change the name, but I would just like to say that the group that started kitchen table conversations, even before Indi with Purple Sage, got rid of Kennett in Victoria, was the Victorian Women's Trust run by Mary Crooks. And I've been working with Mary now particularly intensively over the last 18 months for The Voice. But I just want to acknowledge how important this methodology is. I think it's gorgeous. You're going to call it whatever you're going to call it. I'll be right there. I'm going to join your organisation tonight. It's fantastic. Because the thing that drives me, and that's the question, I guess, for Kate, is the thing that anguishes me at the moment, and it's anguishing me more and more, and I'm getting angrier and angrier, is that so much of our science, our fabulous, rigorous science, from things like developmental pathways that can stop kids going into Banksia, right through to the harmful effects of burning fossil fuels on children's health and well-being. I was very buoyed up when Scott Morrison was in power because he listened to the fucking science. And I thought, oh, the world has changed. After COVID, we're all going to be sensible. So what can the independents do? What's the methodology that you use to use people like me and all my colleagues and all the climate guys and all the rest of it to make a difference, because it's really, really urgent. I mean, we're wasting millions on detention and we're killing children. I can't bear it. And we are going to kill future children. In fact, we are killing children already because of climate change.
So one of the things that has been amazing about being in this role is that people are very generous with their time and their expertise. So it's pretty incredible to be able to, on any topic, ring the best expert in the country on it and say, can you tell me about this issue for half an hour? And we try to do that, the way we're working, we try to do that with an open mind and ask people with different perspectives on an issue, their view, before coming to a view. And then in terms of how we get that through, it's really challenging because it's very attractive to have a simple message and someone to blame, a simple solution and someone to blame. And so many of the populist and divisive issues that we see, they come down to that. And as soon as you see that there's a simple solution and someone to blame, question it, because often it's a whole lot more complex. We work, I and the other crossbenchers, we form our positions on things. I form a position based on trying to speak to people who are impacted by an issue, and then often behind the scenes go and meet with a minister, because in every other area I've worked, you don't get change by backing people into the corner and shouting at them. But that's sort of how we do it in politics. So instead, you go have a meeting, you talk about it, you present the evidence, and often then, if the change does happen, you don't get any credit for it because it's presented as an amendment that the government's doing, which is fine, right? You get it done. So I think, how do we do that? That's how I'm trying to do it. Is focus on the outcomes rather than the noise, and try and work, assuming the best of people, and putting the evidence forward. On nuclear, I wrote a letter to Ted O'Brien last week and said, please, to inform me, can you share with me which scientists and economists you're relying on who say that nuclear is a good solution for Australia? Because I want to hear that. I'm not seeing those. And we have to be curious. We have to be open to facts that don't fit our particular version of the world, and be brave about that. And I think increasingly we see this polarisation and simplification, and we all have to avoid the laziness and be open to being challenged. And that's how I'm trying to do it.
We have one over back.
Hello, it is for Kate. My name's Roy Lewison. I'm from the Waikam Valley community. Recently I heard a journalist from the Sydney Morning Herald say that when you're a member of a political party, your first allegiance is to yourself because you're trying to fend off all the other people in your party to make sure that you survive. Your second allegiance is to the party, and your third allegiance is to the electorate. He also mentioned that party politicians spend a lot of time raising funds for the party. I just wanted to get your views on, as an independent, how much time you spend raising funds, how much time you spend trying to fend off other people, and how much time you spend representing your electorate.
Yeah, sure. So raising funds, really none. No time. I probably should be spending some time doing that. I will need to start spending some time doing that, but I've really struggled with the idea that in this job you spend 2 years doing the job and then a year talking about doing the job next time. I just want to do the bloody job. But no doubt I do. I will have to have some fundraising events and that sort of thing. But I never do cash for access events. So the idea is you hear me speak and then you can decide whether to make a donation or not you spend $3,000 and get to have dinner with me. And in fact, a constituent said to me, oh, it's great the access we have with all these events you have. If I spoke to my old MP this much, it would have cost me a fortune. So you can only do it at expensive events. How much time fending off others? None, really. I mean, Well, because there isn't that. And I feel for people who are in parties, because it's true, you're constantly thinking about your career path, because actually you're there as part of the executive government in waiting, not as part of the legislature. You don't engage on legislation unless you're on a specific policy committee within the party. You're there to further your career. And I don't have a career path from here. This is the job. So my focus is on connecting with the community, listening to the community, and doing the very best I can in my role as part of the legislature, improving legislation. So that's the whole job, and it's freeing to not have a career path to have to be, thinking about and planning.
I know that Adam had his hand up, but somebody had their hand up before. Oh, here we are, we're back. I'll just say, I've got an Excel spreadsheet on my computer of the people who demand money and then ghost me to speak at these events. Maybe it will be leaked one day.
Thanks everyone. This is a fabulous event. So many good people. And, I hope something comes of it. I really do. Small beginnings, yes, that's good. I understand, because I've been there as an independent. And I have a background question, which probably won't get answered tonight, but I'd love to know if you've got a few people sort of kind of lined up to do the job, front person, but I don't really expect an answer for that. But Kate, I really appreciate the Teals being there, and I think that the Albanese government has to look forward to a minority government coming up, and they'll probably rather work with the Teals than the Greens, because they hate the guts of the Greens, which is a shame, because I think the Greens have got best policies and stick to them. My question is about Gaza. I mean, it's a huge issue in our community and globally. It's everywhere. I did write to all the Teals, probably in December, and said, please say something about Gaza, preferably together. I know you do talk to each other, and sometimes you agree and sometimes you don't, but I thought how powerful it would be if the Teals could speak together about Gaza. It would have hastened the Labor Party's very, very slow progress on this issue. It's an absolute disgrace. There's a slaughter going on, and it doesn't look like ending anytime soon. So I'm just wondering how much you and the others get together, and if you agree. I mean, I've seen quite a few press conferences where you have come out and spoken together, and that's really powerful. So I'd love you to do that about Gaza. What do you reckon?
So we've talked about it a lot. In my office, we talk about it a lot. And the approach that I've taken has been direct to Penny Wong and her office, writing, meeting, we have briefings regularly to communicate that we are hearing loud and clear from our electorates that we need a ceasefire, we need a two-state solution, we need humanitarian aid and the release of hostages. I've not spoken about it publicly much because of the huge division that I can see happening in our country and in our communities. And some of my colleagues on the East Coast did, and it caused more harm than good, really. And so I found it a really interesting challenge to look at when are you speaking out because it has an impact, and when are you doing it in a performative way? And so I decided the best thing that I could do would be advocate directly to the Foreign Minister's office and put that pressure on, but also give that permission there. We the Teals attempted to shift the focus and try and create a situation where we could all rise above the domestic point scoring that's happening. And talk about what we have in common, that we all want peace and focus on that. Unfortunately, and Sophie asked a question in question time, which the Prime Minister used as an opportunity to get stuck into the Greens, and then the opposition leader got stuck into the Greens, and it left us feeling furious because we wanted this to be an opportunity to say social cohesion is important. We all want peace. There's never a reason to vilify people in Australia who are not part of this. But it has been a very difficult issue, and I get accused in emails every day of either condoning genocide or being anti-Semitic. And sometimes I think as a representative, you also have to bear people's anger. So I'm not going to be able to fix the situation. It's very hard to see what a good solution looks like. And I'll keep putting pressure on Penny Wong and the government to use the channels that they have, which are sometimes quite complex as well. I know that's an unsatisfying answer. Sorry, we've got into policy instead of the community independent movement.
There's two people. You can clap. 3 people. So I'm just going to say we're encouraging using all of the panel, asking more questions. A question somebody who's quite shy, who doesn't want to ask, has asked for Lily. I'll ask Adam in a second. But somebody from the audience wants to know: have you a candidate lined up? And if not, why? So you can answer that after Adam asks his question. Is that okay if she goes now? Yeah, go ahead.
It's a really good and very saucy question. Our immediate priority is to launch into a really deep listening process, and we'd love for you to join us in that. Inevitably, lots of people already, even in our very early stages, are coming forward and saying, what about Carol? What about Tom? What about Barry? And that's awesome. We just log that detail to the side for the time being, and we say, oh, cool, let's look back at that when we have enough data on what the values, concerns and needs of the community are, and then we can do a bit of a Tinder sort of matchmaking, swipe left and right on that pool. So it's great if people have an interest in it or want to put someone forward or send it through, and we'll, when the time comes, we'll have a squiz at it all. Hopefully that answers your question.
Hi, I'm Adam. Kate, thank you for your work in advocating for peace. I've been trying to communicate with Josh Wilson to do the same thing, and it's been quite a frustrating process, so thank you for that. My question is about housing. It's a very thorny issue, and the housing crisis that's going on right now. My question is for the panel. Fremantle is kind of a ground zero for housing at the moment. There's a large homeless community here. Rents are rising incredibly high. House prices are skyrocketing. It's a systemic issue. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to touch on policy again. So as community independents, how would you start to develop a housing policy that really makes sense? So there are parties, minority parties, doing really good work in this area. So I'm just curious about how a community independence movement would be able to address the housing crisis in a good way, in a real way.
Kate's flicked that one to me. I work 2 days a week for Kate, and one of the things Kate got me to work on was housing. And what's clear with the community independence is it's a massive issue, obviously, cost of living, housing. So they're there as community independents to engage with their community. So Kate did something novel in Curtin, which I don't think has been done before by the parties. It was to hold 2 community housing forums. The first community housing forum was to present data and to listen to the community on what they wanted as outcomes from housing, and did they see it, for instance, as a home rather than an investment asset? What were their priorities? And it was largely about listening. And then the second housing forum was taking the concerns of the community and giving it to 3 experts, different experts throughout the housing continuum, to look at that and engage with the community, give a quick presentation and then a Q&A, which led to Kate doing a community housing report in December last year. It's available on our website. The long and the short, Kate might take over from here. There is no easy solution. Cutting immigration is a lever which will make about 1% difference. But Kate and the other TEALs have each gone back to their community and listened, and there are some priorities. Good infill done well in Curtin, is better than being NIMBYs, and Caitlin did a good infill forum about a month ago. So there are certain 4 or 5 key priorities. It is empowering renters as well. It's about listening to them, unlike a lot of the major parties. I know the Greens are good on that. So there are some key priorities, and Kate is following up with a further forum which might involve Alan Kohler presenting how different levers could be pulled.
We haven't got him yet.
Yeah. And there have been community housing forums on a community democracy model, which Kylie Tink's done. So it's going back to the community because the majors haven't solved it.
And I just want to add, it is complex, and anyone who tells you there's a simple answer for housing is, not looking at the depth of the problem. The big problem that we have is that 20 years ago the average house was 4 times the average income. Now it's 8 times. So we actually have to decide what we're aiming for on housing. How affordable should housing be? If it should be 4 times, not 8 times, then really we need to pull the levers so that housing prices stay the same for 20 years while wages catch up. And that is politically very unpalatable when 2/3 of households are owned. And that's why neither of the major parties is actually willing to say this is how affordable housing should be. Then you've got to work out all the levers to pull to get the supply up so that supply and demand works, rather than throwing fuel on the fire by saying you can access your super, which increases prices. And so it's this really complex issue that is not going to be fixed overnight. But we we need to be pulling all the levers, but not demonising immigrants, for example. And I think it's very attractive to try and find a simple solution, but this is a wicked, complex problem that is going to take a long time, and it really needs to be based on a concept of intergenerational equity, that actually people in their 20s who work hard should have some prospect of owning a house one day.
Hello. My question's for Kate. I met you at your UWA OWIC, and we had a lovely chat then, and I think my question's been burning inside, and I didn't ask it as nicely as I should have the first time. But my question is, approaching the 25 federal election, and as much of a nerd I am, and I like to speculate how the crossbench will decide, it's more likely we'll see a minority government. The question as to who leads that minority government we'll know the answer to after May, hopefully. What do you think the role of community independents are when inevitably or potentially Dutton and Albo come to the table to seek support to form a minority government?
Yeah, it's one of the scenarios that may play out after 2025. And I suppose fundamentally, I think that my role is the same whether I'm holding the balance of power or not. And that is, on every issue, to look at the evidence and make a decision based on the evidence and do what I can to improve those laws. So I wouldn't do a deal that said I would vote the same way as one party or the other on every piece of legislation, because that's not what I bring to politics. I can't imagine working in that way. I and the other Teals, we talk about it regularly. We all want to be a constructive part of our democratic system. We want stable government, and I think probably we will get to a point where we agree on a list of issues that we collectively think are priorities that we would discuss, and there could be some individual variation in that too. But we need to be open to working with either side of the House, partly because if you're not, then you lose your bargaining power straight away. But also that's the thing, and I think being pragmatic and saying we think any laws can be improved, and we need to be thinking of the interests of a larger group of people, not just the ones who back the party that happens to win. Means we take that same balanced approach into a minority government if that's what happens, and work with, you know, whichever party has the backing of the country and on the issues that we think are the most important. So there isn't a really clear answer, but I feel really confident that the other crossbenchers and I actually want to be part of a constructive system that delivers better outcomes, and that principle will underpin anything that we do in the next government.
I know we've got some marketing geniuses in the room here. I know one's back over there. I wonder whether we could rebrand minority government to like open and collaborative parliaments, because are they the same side of, are they of the same coin? Two sides? Balanced parliament, not hung parliament. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a rebrand maybe that could take place, and we could view it a bit differently potentially. Sounds pretty good. I don't know if Voldemort would ever collaborate with anybody to form some sort of... if you've read the Harry Potter books, come on.
So we've got 4 people in line. Thank you all so much for your patience. We have 1, 2, thank you so much for your patience. And then I believe Ken, you were 3, and you were 4. Thank you so much for your patience.
Hi there, my name's Beck. My question is about that combativeness that we have probably all observed in Parliament, that unwillingness to concede ground, that kind of thing. My observation is that's probably linked to a culture of toxic masculinity that got really revealed in a strong way, at the end of Morrison's final term. And it's not lost on me either that all the community independents from the last election that won were women, and I'm just quite interested in that dynamic and whether, if there is a link, and whether you have any of you on the panel have something to comment about what more women and more femininity would add to our culture and politics.
At the risk of hogging the answers, I'm going to tackle that one. Yeah, look, it's really, people say, oh, is it really sexist and awful in Parliament? It's not for me, because I'm never in a situation where there's someone with power over me that I have to, bow down to. So I've actually found it a pretty empowering environment. I do think that having more women in Parliament is a good thing. And I think, I've worked in jobs before where I've had influence but not power, and you work differently, and often if you want to get something to change, the best way to do it is to let someone think it was their idea. It works, if you're interested in the outcome rather than the appearance of it, then you go for it. And I think that there is more collaboration coming from the crossbench. I live with Monique Ryan and Allegra Spender in Canberra, and we have people over for dinner once a fortnight or a week, and we try to have people from all across the house to build human relationships with them, and just sit down and have a meal. We don't talk about policy, we just talk about our lives. And I think building those relationships and those connections, women maybe do it naturally, more easily. Some of the people we've had for dinner haven't had a meal with someone from another party before, because they literally stay in their, not even just in their parties, but in their factions. And so I think building those relationships is a really important part of trying to build a more collaborative and cooperative thing. And if you're someone and you think they're a dreadful person and everything they stand for I'm against, and then they come over for dinner and you discover that they're a saxophonist and they've got a pet, and it actually does humanise things. And I think that that's some of what more femininity in politics can do. I'm going to promise to make shorter answers from now on, sorry.
Thank you all very much, and it's fantastic to have this gathering and this opportunity. I guess a question regarding community independence. The Fremantle community is diverse. It has many different stakeholders within it. There are people from low socioeconomic circumstances. There are people perhaps in the city who are more affluent. One of the vexed issues, facing us at the moment is AUKUS and the incredible amount of spending that is going into defence. I guess you know, from a community independence point of view, how would you go about sort of negotiating, for example, some people see AUKUS as, you know, really good for economic investment in jobs, others are worried about the nuclear safety aspect, others are worried about, you know, should we have an alliance with the US, should we not? These are really complicated issues, and I guess how would you go about really canvassing those issues in a very diverse community and developing policy where you can, you know, actually present considered responses to policy that the government is pulling down fastly and furiously.
Why not? That's a really good question. I was just having a 1 hour very deep conversation with someone about that very issue. It's also really interesting you mentioned AUKUS, because when we ran our first mock good faith conversation, kitchen table conversation, it was actually a pub table conversation, it was here at the local. It came up a lot because one of the questions in our from the model that comes from Victoria Women's Trust that everyone has gone and made their own in their communities. One of the questions is, what are your top 3 to 5 concerns at the local and national level? And I'm interested and curious to see how much that's going to come up. And then once we do our community report, when we run as many of these conversations as is humanly possible, it'll be really interesting to see how prevalent this is and across which suburbs and which demographics, because I'm sure just from being a punter in the community, it's on the top of many people's minds. So I'm really looking forward to working with our group and whoever volunteers. Please volunteer to run these in your suburbs, wherever you live. It'll be really interesting to see what comes out of it and how prevalent that issue is for people.
I might just add, sorry, clap, yes, clap. I might just add, I mean, it's really hard because on every issue there is a divergence of opinion. It's not like I can say, this is what I know my community believes. And it has to be, so every decision I make on a combination of factors. We definitely look at how many emails have we had from people on this issue and what have they thought. What are the experts saying? We try to speak to at least an expert or 2 on each side. And also there's your conscience as well. Ultimately, I have to live with the vote that I cast. And so there's no magic formula. And as a representative, you're not just there to take a poll and everything and you know, feed it in. You also are there for your judgment. So you know, it's a complex thing, that decision-making process. And we talk a lot about how we do that with integrity, because it's not black and white.
Good evening. We've been talking a lot about the system, and the system we work under is what's called the Westminster system, which basically means that the legislature and the executive are the same. There are other systems. The American system, where the legislation and the administration are clearly different. The French system, where it's sort of halfway with an elected president and people who are in the legislative function, who behave quite independently in both the other two from observation. So my question is, in addition to having a referendum that says we want to become a republic, should we have a referendum that says we want to have an executive under the elected president and a legislature, which would give opportunities for many of the people here who are raising concerns about their feeling that they're disempowered?
There are lots of different ways we could reform our democracy. And actually on the separation of the legislature and the executive, I couldn't really get my head around that until I read A.C. Grayling's book, The Good State, where he talks about that being one of the problems of democracies. The thing that I think is interesting about the community independent movement is that we are creating a point of difference between the executive and the legislature. I am there for my role in the legislature. And it's very difficult, if you're in a party, it's difficult to understand that. You know, when I go in to vote, most of the time the major parties don't even really know what they're voting for. They just go in and go to the side that they're told to go to. So I think there are ways that we can evolve our democracy organically, as well as big pieces of reform. On the referendum question, I don't think we'll be having one anytime soon. There are a whole lot of other things that would be good to fix too, like 4-year terms, fixed 4-year terms instead of 3-year terms. That would require a referendum. Probably won't happen soon. But the principle that underpins what you're saying is we need to keep evolving our democracy, and it is fragile. And if we don't allow it to evolve, then it will stagnate. So we need to keep having those conversations and looking at ways we can make it better.
Okay, we've got 5 questions left. I'm closing it now. So I was going to invite somebody who hasn't been before, and you're a fresh face, my friend. So thank you for putting up your hand. So you'll be the last questioner, okay? This is Robert Dawes. He's the other half of the Fremantle Network. Round of applause, please.
I just want to get one thing straight. The Teals and the independent movement is very admirable, but they did not start this process of grassroots democracy and participation. In fact, if you were to take your pen now and on that sheet that they've handed out, cross off Voices and write Greens, you would have a document that describes how the Greens are doing politics for the last 30 years. I'm less interested in the bragging rights than the fact that we have another group of people who are committed to this way of doing politics, and in particular for trying to get a variety of voices into our system rather than the 1% and the wealthy and the corporations dominating. So thank you for that. You have to realise that when you vote for someone, they are going to be contributing to big decisions about major issues that affect your life. There's nothing in that document much, apart from the word compassion, that gives you any idea what the candidate is going to do. So when the Greens try and get through Medicare covering dental care and health care, if we get a win on that, that is a huge win for the people of Fremantle. If we get free education from early childhood through university, that is a big win for the people of Fremantle. You need to know if your independent candidate is going to have those sorts of values. Lily, I'd like to make you an offer you can't refuse. We, the Greens, have been door-knocking relentlessly in Fremantle for months, so let's do a swap in the bar after. I will give you all the information that we have from hundreds of conversations about what the people of Fremantle want. What do we want in return? We want to borrow Simon Holmes a court for a few weeks. Because certainly I am very useless at fundraising, and I've heard he's brilliant. Do we have a deal? I'd like to go one step further. If you guys can knock off a few more of the smug bastards from the Dutton Nasty Party, the Greens will cheer to the rafters. What do we want in exchange? When the Greens win Fremantle, we want you to cheer from the rafters as well. So what do we have, ladies and gentlemen? We have the Independents and the Greens as a mutual admiration society. We are united in our commitment to put a huge, serious rocket under the ALP and the Liberals to get rid of their belief, their arrogant, democracy-destroying belief that they are entitled to every seat in Australia. And that's what we want to do. So, let's hear it for the Mutual Admiration Society. I'm going to have it, and everyone in this room who wants a stronger democracy and more voices should have a drink with me.
because I've been watching Sopranos. Anyone seen The Sopranos? And I've loved all of the mafia references that Rob just put into that. It was I'm so at the edge of my seat. I love your passion and enthusiasm. You make some very good points. And yes, if you do have the data from your door knocking, let's put it into the final report. We need to run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of more of these. So let's gather data and make a sexy little report.
I think tonight we've established a beautiful thing.
Hello, I'm Paul. I'm one of Lily's volunteers. And
Voices for Fremantle.
Voices for, I was about to say that. Voices for Fremantle. So on your tables you've got a pamphlet there with Voices for Fremantle, and at the bottom right corner there's a website where you can contact us to become involved. Now, that's important because one of the things that I found when I got involved with this concept was, how is this different? And the conclusion I came to is that we've turned the whole idea of politics and your representative on its head. So instead of us voting for a member of Parliament, we actually come up with the criteria that we want, that's important for us. And we then look for a parliamentarian, a candidate, that can do that for us. So we've seen here, people have been saying to Kate, what can you do about this? How would you go about doing this? What we're talking about here is coming up with the criteria that we want in Fremantle. Not just the criteria for the policies, but the criteria for the MP. What sort of person do we want? How do they think? What's their approach to policy? So if, for example, then housing was to become a major issue for us, you'll be the ones that are providing the ideas. Instead of saying, Kate, what's the solution? Josh, what are Labour going to do about it? What we'll do as a community, by talking to one another, by discussing these things around the kitchen table, we'll be coming up with not only the issues, the things that are important to us, but also suggesting how we do it. It's up to you. We're turning the whole idea up on its head. You're the ones that are going to be driving this. And the only way you're going to drive it is by looking at that sheet, getting the web address, contacting us, and then we'll organise some kitchen tables. Kitchen tables are small groups, 4, 5, 6 people, facilitated by somebody like myself, to get a conversation going from you about what you want, what you're unhappy about, how can we do things better.
Note as well, because there's been a lot of mention around models and processes and where those things come from. I just want to acknowledge as well that we have this kind of Western tendency to assume that a particular group of people within the last few decades came up with stuff. Ultimately, it's all come from somewhere. Confucian culture 3,000 years ago, or our First Nations people probably ran similar types of, not kitchen table conversations, but other formats. So these models and processes are open source. That's what they should be, and that's what they always have been. And it's up to communities like us to use them to, upgrade our democracy, engage better, expect better outcomes and better representation. So I will just point that out, that nothing's new, but it can be very exciting, and we can make it very Freo flavoured. And I think that's the exciting part of this, is that we can do it in the way that suits us. If you don't have a table, you might have a coffee table, you might be in a dog park, there could be a picnic table, you could do it over Zoom. It's just choose your own adventure, really. And I'd like to thank all of the cultures before us that developed these models and processes, because we get to use them now.
Just one very quick point. This is genuine community representation, which was passionately put. It's bottom up, it's brilliant. Just a point, beware teal washing or community independent washing, which comes from the major parties, where they know the word community. Let's start using that a lot. We're for trees, we're for this, we're for listing. We're doing our surveys, etc. So just be where there's genuine bottom-up community representation, and then there's sort of community independent washing by the parties who want to make it look like we're listening, but we know how they're voting.
Can I just say, if it does make them listen more, that's good too. You know, like you can have an effect even without winning the seat by changing the expectations of your representative.
But I think they're bullshitting.
Okay, everybody, we've got 3 more questions. Then you get to meet one another, top of your glasses and go to Dunny. For the last people asking questions, I ask you to be concise and merciful.
Thanks. I want to come back to the issue of nomenclature, which you mentioned. And when I studied politics, which was over nearly 60 years ago, you talked about government, not about power. Power was reserved for dictatorships and other sundry undesirable forms of government. So can I make a plea that wherever possible we don't talk about power, we talk about government, and that government is a much more collegiate type of process. Secondly, I'd just like to make an observation that the major parties are in fundamental and systemic decline. Their membership has been declining for decades, and that to some extent is also reflected in the low levels of primary vote that they get currently in elections. My concern is that leaves them very open and very vulnerable to capture by various interest groups, and we've seen it happen in WA, we've seen it happen in Victoria, and they're also very, very vulnerable to influence from lobby groups as well. So starting small and building up from that is a great concept. My question is it possible to accelerate the scaling up of that to minimise the potential capture of the political parties by other interests?
Oil and gas.
An experience with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by scaling up. What do you mean, like form a new party?
No. Just get the whole movement expanding.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're doing here. Yeah.
It's a question of how far.
And before I agreed to run, I thought, how could this turn out? I don't want to be a part of something that's destructive, you know. Am I going to break democracy? And thought it could really end in 3 ways. We could, the parties could reform and change and listen to communities better and better represent their values. It wouldn't be terrible. We could end up with a larger crossbench, which is probably a bit messier, but probably truer to the fact that we deal with complex issues that generally don't fit on a binary, you know, red versus blue scale. Thought that wasn't too bad. All parties could evolve and break up and change, and that wouldn't be a bad thing either. So in the end, when I said yes, I thought, I think it would only have positive outcomes, not the chaos and uncertainty that, you know, that's promised. It could be a bit messier because actually it's pretty clean when one team makes the decisions and the other team sits back and throws rocks and then they swap. But it's truer to a democracy and likely to reflect the interests of more people if we deal with the messiness.
To answer your question around scale, right now in WA, there are several groups either emerging or already established, already at the stage of looking for candidates, selecting candidates, or maybe they're still in a community listening. So there's officially Forest, Moore, Durack, Curtin, Cottesloe, just launched, woo! Churchlands, Churchlands, Nedlands is coming online next week or something like that. Hasluck, Bullwinkle are mobilising and meeting. So there's your scale. It's all coming up. Voices for Fremantle. Sorry, I should plug our own group. That's, you know, soft launching today. And so that might be your scale question. And also, if you have feedback on language, come along to a meeting. I'd love to hear your feedback on how we've said stuff. Oh, and the OG here, Dennis Stewart from Voices for Indite. He's
travelling around the country.
He's here talking to the groups and doing really fun stuff regionally. You were just at the Rural Leadership Workshop out in Merredin, and I can't say the G1, Goomelling. Thank you, Simon. See, I said it right. And how was that? Tell us how that was.
Well, the Goomelling group, the leadership program at Merredin was being put on by the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation, and we're invited to come along to a group of about 16, 18 people who were thinking about wanting to develop their leadership capability. So it wasn't specifically voices, but I was invited to go and speak within it to talk about here's one way in which communities can be listened to, reacted to, how people can feel as if they're living in a rural community is not going to just deplete, it's going to be a growing sense of new possibilities. So the other meeting we had at Norseman, Northern, Norseman. Didn't go to Norseman. There was people from many of those seats that you mentioned then, and some young people a fellow who had recently driven right around Australia with an electric vehicle and a trailer, and he got back home, and he's going to be, I think he's living in Bullwinkle, but it's just really interesting to see who comes up, and he had a really strong sense of how that's such an important thing to demonstrate that this is possible. It's not and I think he got a bit cheeky and went and got his photo taken outside Peter Dutton's office, Scott Morrison's office, excuse me. Yeah. But I was just going to say, in addition to the seats that you mentioned, in the last election, there's about five community independent candidates who weren't successful, but they really shook things up. So there's another, I'm going to say at least 5 in the offing right now, or potentially. So that's part of the scaling up we're talking about. In addition to the seats that are starting up, there's ones that are coming around for second time round, and they're looking in a pretty good position.
Kimberly, wow.
Alright, so yes, my name is Kimberly and I'm trying to ask you questions and I'm looking over here. So I recently attended a webinar that was put on by a group called Women for Election, not because I'm seeking election, but because I lead a campaign in Dublin. Something that really blew my mind, and an agenda issue has been raised. One of the topics was about, it was about how to present yourself, and I thought it would be public speaking and sort of, how to carry yourself as a candidate. But it was makeup and clothing, and so I'm really staunchly in favour of pretty is not a rent I pay for occupying a space marked female. And I also just threw out 10-year-old makeup because apparently it expires. So I'm really keen to know the campaign part of it. You've already spoken about how women operate in Parliament and how the Teal Independents kind of collectively bring that empathy and bring that connection and bring that relating. But I'm just absolutely blown away, and no shade on Women for Election. I think that they're doing a really, really incredible job, but they're operating within this sort of social structure that we exist in, where there are particular expectations on women. And how does that go in the campaign, and how much impact does that have on the way that you run the campaign, the way that you engage with the community, and the way that you engage with media?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I hadn't bought a new piece of clothing for 2 years when I started the campaign. And I did actually buy new clothes in the campaign, largely because I needed to have more things this colour. Now I have a wardrobe of things this colour and have to wear them for the next 10 years. I did at one point, my team said, you need to buy a new bra. And it might be nice if you put some lippy on, and maybe don't go to the photo shoot with wet hair. So, I think there are some it did change how I present myself in some ways. But ultimately, you've still got to feel like yourself. I mean, at the first photo shoot, they turned up at my house with a white suit, which I obediently put on, which my husband calls my Michaela Cash photo shoot. And it still pops up in the West every now and then, and I go, oh, there it is again. And after that, I just wore my own clothes. But you know, and I suppose it was such a steep learning curve of changing, you know, thinking differently about things and how you present yourself. You know, unfortunately, on my social media, I want to do the hard stuff all the time, and my team point out, oh, when you do a photo of you and your son going to see a play, or you and your husband going to a costume party, it gets way more likes than when you do a speech about housing. So you know, this is the reality of the world we live in, and you have to be a bit pragmatic about it. But I think you just have to find your own path through it and stay true to yourself.
So, one, and when Felicity is wrapping it up, I invite you both to be very, very concise. You're doing marvellous.
I can do that. My name's Alistair Patterson. I'm one of the members for Cottesloe Independent. There's a few here tonight. We're like a week older than you guys. So. We don't have brochures, but we do have a social media presence, so if you look us up, you'll find us. And of course, Cottesloe does include Fremantle, North Fremantle, so it's part of the electorate as well. So I just wanted to go back to Tony's point, his third theme that we didn't get a chance to pick up on, and that is that we have, say, 8 months as we move forward to a state election, finding candidates and finding out what the community, what's the gap between what the community wants and what the current likely representative who we're taking on actually believes in. How's the best way to get that data, and how are we planning to get that data and actually use it effectively? Thank you.
I'm a lawyer by training, so what I did, I'm not sure if it worked, but did a document, you could be the next member for Curtin, and it had a little column about mismatching and what Celia Hammond, you know, believed on marriage equality and different things, and the party. It seemed to show there was a big opportunity, but there are things like how they vote, which is more or less accurate, which gives... They vote for you, I think it's called. So it's not that hard to find out if you dig in to find out how your MP votes, which will no doubt be how the party votes.
I have to point out that website says I'm a bit so-so on climate because I got COVID and missed a whole lot of votes for a week. So there are some problems with its methodology, but They Vote For You is a good place to start. I'll just add, work with that case. So it's not an exact science, Al, I think. It's working out what people care about and how it compares to the... I mean, obviously you can go along and ask the other candidate what their views are on a range of issues. And then just, if you've got the right range of issues, it will motivate people to get behind it and get active. And so it sort of is self-fulfilling a little bit. If there are issues where the gap's big enough, people will, you know, turn up to things like this and make it happen.
And I should say we were given the issues in that we, you know, our brother-sister electorates and, you know, said that it's climate, it's gender equality, it's integrity, it's an anti-corruption commission, it's all of those things which, you know, when we reached out, that was it. So
I didn't feel like we were given the issues by our brother and sister electorates. I don't know if you did. I mean, we compared notes and had similar feelings. We didn't talk about gender that much, actually, in Curtin. It didn't feel like it was as much of an issue as some of the others, but we talked a little bit more about inclusion. So you just, you know, they emerge.
Our final question up here for publicity.
Thank you. I was wondering about those votes. Yeah, I was looking at how you voted on things, and I was very curious about why you missed those. So, yeah, great to have some clarity there around that. I know I have to be really brief, but I just want to say it's so wonderful to be in a room full of people that really want action on climate and integrity in government. So important. for people in the room that know me, know that I am a member of the Greens. So we do have, shared stance on things like action on climate, pro-women, and integrity in government. Hi, Lily. Oh, I thought you were waving at me.
I was waving at this lady here, but we're actually trauma bonded because we attended an MP meeting together.
We did.
I'm still recovering
with our current state MP. Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. So there are things that I'm familiar with, the community consultation. That's something that Greens do a lot. I'm familiar with the work that goes into that, with the amount of doors that I've knocked on, talking to people in the community. However, as a member of the Greens, I'm also really used to transparency and having evidence-based party policies freely available for people to access on our website so they know where we stand on issues. And I think this is something that's really important for voters. And I know there have been questions about policy issues tonight, about Palestine, AUKUS. And this goes to my question, which is about your reversal on your stance on the live sheep export. And I wanted to know how you came to that stance, because I don't imagine there's a lot of farms in Curtin. It's a hot issue for people in Fremantle, given that we are at the pointy end of that. We see those animals leaving from our doorstep.
I'm happy to talk about it. My point would be, here in Fremantle, your representative may come to a different view, and that's exactly how it should be. I had tried to, as we always do, hear both sides of the story. I got in a room, someone from the Australian Live Export Council, a farmer, someone from the RSPCA and a vet, and we had an hour-and-a-half conversation, at the end of which I said, well, it's complicated, isn't it? It's not a simple issue. You say there are no farmers in Curtin. I had a lot of correspondence. No farms, right, but there are farmers. I had a lot of correspondence from constituents telling me their personal stories about how this was going to affect them, their livelihoods, their families, their mental health. I did also have emails on the other side. They tended to be campaign emails that people had, pressed the button. And I had this slow dawning. I thought, I actually have to listen to these stories that I'm hearing. It was a very difficult decision to change, to vote that way when I'd previously indicated that I would vote the other way. I had consistently said this is a very complex issue. Here are the good arguments on both sides, and I made that call. The people in my office, it was interesting. There was a sense of relief when I made that call to change, and I said, where did this relief come from? And did everyone think that I should have been going the other way in the office, and I didn't, hear that in my office? And actually, it emerged that no. A lot of people in the office as well had changed their view over the last week or two as we'd heard more and more of those personal stories. So what I've said is, I think there are still problems with the industry. We need to have better measures of sheep welfare. It has improved, and it looks like the industry is declining anyway. We focused our efforts on what does the transition package look like, because I knew pragmatically that how I voted wasn't going to change the outcome, but actually there are lots of farmers who are struggling, and we wanted to make sure that they were looked out for. So it was based on an inexact science. We looked at the volume of correspondence we had on both sides, the depth of it, and politics is often about making really tough calls, and sometimes you have to make that call. So it doesn't have to, no one in Curtin is going to agree with me all the time, and you have to make those decisions and listen, and also be willing to change your mind. And if you're in a major party, you don't get to do that. If you're an independent, you can actually ask your community what they think, listen to them, and adjust accordingly. So it's tough.
And it's interesting that that's the final words that you've said here. It's tough, and that's the feeling that I've got here tonight, that this work is challenging and difficult, but very much worthwhile. And fun.
And fun.
Even though you do sometimes get made an offer that you can't refuse. So what I'll do is give the speakers a minute to think about what if they want to have a final closing comment in a second. And while they're doing that, for everyone else to just take a minute and, you know, have a moment of gratitude for the people who have rocked up here tonight and for everyone in the room who has brought such a positive energy here tonight, because these things are only as good as the people and the energy who arrive to them. So thank you all for making such a wonderful night. And let's now hand over to our speakers for their final, succinct closing comment.
It's really exciting that you're here tonight. I'm really glad that I got to share it with you. It is fun, it's a wild ride, and no matter what the end outcome is, if you get involved and you do the work, you will actually change the community and how your community is being represented. So it's worth it, it's fun, do it.
Yeah, it's a very positive, embracing movement, and really it shows that anything is possible from where you start, where many of the groups have started. So Fremantle can watch out.
Watch out. Final words, final words, final words. Please get in touch. Please leave your details. I know politics can be super lame and very feel very convoluted and opaque, but it doesn't have to be, and we can take that power back. Sorry to use the word power. But we really do have quite substantial collective power, and if we realise it, we really could make a difference and get someone in there that truly represents us. So please get in touch. We want to hear from you, whatever your background and your political affiliations are. Thank you.
Can we please have a final round of applause, and thank you so much to all our speakers, Kate, Tony and Lily tonight. And now I'll hand back over to Rob to close the evening.
Let's hear a big round of applause for Ryan, our MC. It's the second time he's done it. He's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for all coming along. It's been brilliant. While we've got such a big number, Christian and I would like to say that if there's anyone who'd like to help us organising it, we'd love it, because we believe that 3 wise men is better than 2 wise men, though every woman I've ever spoken to has said 3 wise men is a mathematical improbability. That it's pretty bad having 2 alpha males. Actually, that's a joke. Christian would go down to Delta, I think, because it's a beautiful place, the Nile Delta. It's also precarious, and that's his favourite word. I would go the maths, theta, the unknown angle, maybe. No, I'd go to pi. As you know, the decimals keep going and going, and Christian reckons that's a perfect description of the way I speak. So if anyone would like to join us, we'd love to have someone else to share the load and the love.